who is coming to us remotely via Zoom, and that is Gerry Hussey. Now, in the spirit of the day, Gerry Hussey has an official job title and an unofficial one, Mary, just like you. Officially, he's a performance psychology consultant and motivational speaker, but people like to call him the soul coach because he embeds things like mindfulness, well-being in with high performance, right? We think we're under pressure to deliver. You guys are under pressure to deliver day by day. We think we are too. But imagine his position whereby he has to motivate people to compete in World Cups, World and European Championships, Olympic Games, Heineken Cups. I can imagine that his mantra is maybe going through Jenny Sexton's head as he takes that very, very slow lead up to kicking the ball. So Gerry is going to give us a sense of how he integrates mindfulness, the power within in terms of motivating people to really perform. Gerry, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly. Can you hear me?
Okay, so anyways, Gerry, the reason the hat is there is because we are going to award 5 copies of Gerry's book, Awaken Your Power Within. Maybe if we're waiting for Gerry, we could maybe do the spot prizes now.
Yeah.
Would you be ready for that? Yes. He's there. Gerry, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
He has some great endorsers, David and Stephen Flynn, who are the happy pair, call Gerry a modern day sage, and they know their herbs. The thing they say about Awaken Your Power Within is this book will change your life for the better. Well, we can't ask for much more than that. And as I say, we'll be awarding spot prizes of 5 copies of Gerry's book, Awaken Your Power Within, at the end of his session. Gerry, we can see you. Will you say a few words, see if we can hear you?
Hello, testing, 1, 2, hello, hello.
Ah, great. We can see and hear you. Gerry, I just gave you a lovely introduction. Maybe you missed it all. Anyways, it was all very nice. And we're looking forward to hearing you. We've got a 50-minute presentation from you, and you're going to talk to us about, well, awakening the power within, but really incorporating this emphasis on mind, body, and spirit in terms of really optimizing performance. I'm going to go away for 50 minutes, Gerry. I'm going to keep an eye on the questions coming in through the chat, and we'll be back to do a Q&A with you after that. Okay, so over to you. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. And people might be confused if you see Happy Peer coming up. I work closely with the guys and we're delivering a Happy Mind program at the moment. So maybe that's why Happy Peer is coming up on my Zoom. Sorry to Tig if you're trying to find me under Soul Space. But fascinating conversations. And I was lucky to catch the last few minutes over there. So it's really great to hear people talking about humans and people understanding that in order to build high performing, it's not really about systems. It's not really about a process. For too long, we over-focused on process and systems. Now we're looking at people because a process, a system is only as good as the person that drives it. So, you know, in some of the sports I work with, we look at Formula One, and Formula One is a phenomenal sport because it has technology, it has quantum physics, it has aerodynamics, it has you know, every type of science you can understand in it. And then when it comes to the body, the human, we look at the nutrition, we look at blood types, we look at resting rate, heart rates, we look at everything going. We look at a helmet, and the helmet can sometimes cost $1 million to $2 million to develop. We look at tiny pieces of marginal gains. And yet what we know is that every team would probably have more or less the same technology, the same helmet, the same tires, the same aerodynamics. So the physical stuff that's available to our team is available to every team. So there's no mystery there. So what happens then is when you look at a team and you look at the car and the technology and the data, the science, the research that's gone into every tiny aspect, electrically, aerodynamically, from a structural point of view. And then you look at the driver putting on the helmet, this helmet that cost maybe $2 million to develop. And then the only question you need to ask is, what if what's inside the helmet isn't right? What if the driver's mental clarity, decision-making, self-belief isn't right? And then we all know that if that's not right, those little 6 inches between the 2 ears, if that's not right, then all the technology goes out the window. And we know that sometimes a driver with the right mentality can outdo sometimes not having the best technology. So through my understanding in life and sport, and I've been lucky enough to work with multiple world Olympic champions, World Cup winning teams, Heineken Cup winning teams, I've got to understand what is the human being. And systems and data and technology and process are all really important. But the space between people's ears, mindset, what people believe about themselves, the stories that run through people's heads, that becomes at times the single most important thing. So golfers, as we know, another sport I work in, they spend so much time looking on technique, and they spend so much time trying to create the most amazing club. And that no matter how amazing the club is, they stand on that green to win the Masters. If what's between their ears isn't right, the club doesn't work. And I think sports teams and I think businesses are the same. We have to build the mind of the people who work for us. We've got to a point where most of us have access to the best technology, the best systems, the best process, the best data. But the question I've always been asking high-performing teams and high-performing organizations is, how well, how much do you focus on developing the minds of the people you work with? What's your understanding around human performance? When it comes to things like sleep, nutrition, meditation, good health, each and all of these things are really, really important when it comes to health, but also important when it comes to performance, because there is no performance without health. And what each and every one of us, whether it's a team, a sports team, or a business, or an organization, what we're looking for is not just performance, it's repeatable and sustainable high performance. So if you have a Formula One team and they have 21 races in a year, that's every single week for 21 weeks, they got to perform. One bad week, it's probably the championship's gone. So what we're looking for when I work with athletes is repeatable, sustainable high performance, so that we can perform again and again and again and again. And sometimes we can achieve that level of performance regardless of external situations or external environments. So we travel around the world, we compete on 21 different tracks in 21 different climates, at 21 different altitudes, in 21 maybe different weather conditions, atmospheric pressures. We have to be able to compete in all of those. If we work at a professional rugby team, we got to compete in all different venues with different crowds, different time zones. So very often in life, we have to ask, what are we trying to build? Are we trying to put all our focus on the stuff outside of the human or the stuff inside the human? And I've been lucky enough and blessed enough and crazy enough to spend the last 30 years asking questions. Questions like, what is the human? So if we were to talk about the importance of what goes on inside the human being, then are we all clear what happens inside the human being? And what I've learned two major things about that modern world. One is that very often we stop one question short of a major breakthrough. We're running and moving and working at such a pace that we're not really asking the really important questions. I really believe the quality and the depth of the questions you ask has a big impact on the quality and the depth of the performance you achieve, the happiness you achieve. And very often we stop one question short. A very simple idea is, if I ask people at times, how do you make the car go faster? So if anybody here, if you put your hands up, anyone here drives a car. If anybody's driven a car for more than 10 years, put your hands up. So if I was to ask you, how do you make the car go faster? Most people would put their hand up and say, no, the answer, you hit the accelerator pedal. But that's not the answer. That's only describing the process. So the next question is, but what happens when you press the accelerator pedal? It's amazing most people at that point say, I don't really know. How do you make your car stop? Most people put their hand up and say, no, you hit the brake pedal. But that's again describing the process. But what happens when you hit that? What happens? Is there fluid involved? And most people say, I don't know. You ask some people about the tides, and we all know we live in a world that's conditioned and shaped all the time by the tides. If anybody live in Galway, you know that we live on the side of a sea and we're watching the tide move all the time. And you ask most people, how do the tides move? And some people put their hand up and say that the moon moves the tide. Again, that's describing the process. So you ask them, how exactly does it move? And then some people start smiling and say, yeah, I'm not too sure. And it's not just the moon that moves the tide, it's the sun. What keeps the earth spinning at exactly 1,000 miles an hour? And what if the earth was to speed up by 1 mile an hour or slow down by 1 mile an hour? What makes the earth stay tilted at exactly the right pitch? What makes sure is that our little galaxy doesn't bang into each other? Who's guiding and directing the planets? Now we begin to ask a question that brings up things like electromagnetic and energy fields. And we begin to ask really important questions. Some of the biggest questions we don't ask are questions like, am I happy? Am I living a life that makes me happy? Am I present in life? Do I spend enough time with the people I love? And am I living my life in a way that allows me to see the best in myself, to experience happiness? Is this the life I dreamed about? Am I allowing my heart to speak? Am I allowing my dreams to be pursued? Am I living my life from a place of love or a place of fear? From a place of calm or a place of distraction? And I think at times we get so locked into chasing things on the outside and chasing things that other people say are important, that very often we don't stop to ask ourselves the big questions. What's important to me? What's true for me? Who am I? That's an amazing question. Who am I? What is the human being? Because I listen to people all the time, they talk about managing human beings, enhancing human performance. So then I ask, what part of the human do you enhance? Is it the neurocircuitry in the brain? Is it the chemistry of the body? Is it the physics of the body? I asked them to tell me about the central nervous system. I asked them to tell me about the microbiome, the chemistry of the brain. And they go very silent. Very often we're trying to motivate, we're trying to inspire, we're trying to understand something without actually understanding. Very often so much of our time and research is out in the outside world, looking out. And we know more about the outside world than we do our own inner world. And I've been lucky enough and blessed enough and crazy enough to spend 30 years looking inward. And the reason I had to was at 11 years old, and if anybody has read my book, at 11 years old was the first time that I thought about committing suicide. And at 11 years old, I was sitting on a blue bike that I bought for my communion money, waiting for the next truck to come around the bend so I could cycle out in front of it. And I didn't know what was wrong. I knew nothing about human beings. I knew nothing about the brain. I knew nothing about consciousness. I knew nothing about the central nervous system. I knew nothing about the microbiome. But all I knew was every day I was filled with anxiety and fear and stress. I knew I couldn't sleep. I knew my heart seemed to be racing all the time. Sometimes I'd break out in sweat. I had a stammer. I couldn't speak. I was failing my exams. I couldn't concentrate. And everybody kept saying, will you just cop on? Will you just focus? And every time they told me, I tried harder and harder and harder, and I couldn't do it. And it got to the point where I just felt like such a failure. What's wrong with me? Why can't I just concentrate? Why can't I just go to sleep? Why can't I slow my heart rate down? So I got to a point where I had to just ask my parents, what's wrong with me? Because we had 8 kids, and anybody knows where I grew up, and you might know me because I'm from Galway. You know, 8 kids, and all my brothers and sisters seemed to be fit and strong and healthy and happy. What was wrong with me? I was born in the same family with the same parents. I ate the same food. I slept in the same house, and they were all good. What was wrong with me? So I kept asking that question, what's wrong with me? Why do I feel like this? So I eventually asked my parents, what's wrong with me? And my parents, with the best will in the world, then started to bring me to the doctors. So my local GP, he tested my heart rate, my blood pressure, my lungs, my kidney. There's nothing wrong with this guy. This guy's perfectly healthy. I went away, nothing changed. I came back to this same GP. Why is this guy back? This guy should look at him. Doesn't he look fit as a fiddle? He's lean as a greyhound, he said. Let's look at the body again. So I checked all the body up and down, blood test, lungs, heart, liver. He's perfectly fine, send him home. Eventually I got to the point where I couldn't breathe. I couldn't stop my mind from racing. Eventually I said to my mother, I don't know if I can stick this. I don't know how long I can hold out. So my mother gathered every cent of money they could to bring me to one of the best pediatricians in Ireland, who was in Galway and only recently retired and became a friend of mine. But at the time, they brought me up and I'm sitting there, my heart racing. So I couldn't stop sweating. I could barely breathe. He brings me into his room and I'm praying that he'll find something. I'm praying that now somebody will find what's wrong with me. And he does the exact same things. And the minute I see him going doing the blood test, I start saying, no, not again, because he's not going to find something. Please look somewhere else. Please ask a different question. He does the blood test, he checks my heart, checks my liver, my lungs, my kidneys, my body. And I'll never forget, he said to my mother, this is a perfectly healthy young boy. And if you ask me, he's making it up so he doesn't have to go to school. At the age of 11, I was exposed to the traditional medicine and I just said, hold on a second here. Either these guys are right and I'm making this up. If these guys are right, I'm making this up. What's wrong with me? Because this is all imagined in my mind. And I never forget the devastation coming out of that day because I really hoped he'd find something. And at 11, 12 years old, you're young, but when you've been exposed to an experience like that, and if anybody has suffered from mental health or anxiety, if anybody has ever lost a parent young, you know that your chronological years are just one indicator. But sometimes life makes you grow up very fast. And I had to grow up very fast. So I kept thinking in my head, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with my brain? Why was I born with this brain? Why couldn't I be born with another brain, a happy brain? Why couldn't my mind be happy? And then I started asking those questions. The mind. And I remember I asked that simple question to my mum one day. I said, is the brain and the mind the same thing? And she said, I presume so, but I don't know. And I remember I asked her, what is the brain? And can you fix the brain? She said, I don't know. A few days later, she came back with some books that she found in a second-hand bookshop. And this is how amazing my mother is. She scoured the country in second-hand bookshops to find a book about the brain or the mind. And at 12, 13 years old, me and my mother went on a journey of discovery. What is the brain? What is the human mind? What is the central nervous system? What is anxiety? And I've been lucky enough to immerse myself in understanding what the human being truly is. And how do we get the human being into a state of flow where everything is calm and everything is in that moment and everything is balanced. And when we begin to slow our inner world down, we begin to slow the outside world down. And suddenly my world isn't fast-paced anymore. Time isn't moving quickly anymore. I'm in the space of calm and focus. I can make better decisions. My heart isn't racing anymore. So when I begin to learn about the human brain, if I was to ask anybody here, and maybe there's neuroscientists on here, maybe there's brain surgeons on here, there's doctors here, who knows who's here. But if I was to ask anybody to write down 5 facts about the human brain that you know to be absolutely true, could you write them down? Could you write 5 facts about Ireland down quicker than you can about the human brain? You are, part of you is the human brain. So when I ask, how well do you know yourself? What I learned about the human brain is the human brain is an extraordinary piece of equipment. It's an amazing thing. And when people ask me what I work at, if I say I'm a sports psychologist, people say, oh, this is like motivation, rah, rah, rah. I'm not into sport. If I say I work on the mind-body connection and integrative wellness, people say, oh, geez, some type of hippie lunatic. If I say I'm the soul coach and I look at the consciousness and where consciousness exists, people, oh, geez, that fella, forget that fella. If I say that I spent 30 years studying the bio-neurochemical existence of the human being and its contribution to human health, people, oh, geez, this guy's up to something. So words are very important. So the first thing we need to realize is the brain in every human being, we exist on 3 levels. We are matter. There's no doubt we have matter. We're protein, we're atoms. But we're also massive chemistry. and we're a mass of electricity. Right now, your brain is generating around 23 watts of electricity. Right now, I could show you your brain is firing neurons all around. There's electrical circuits firing all over your brain. I could show you that electricity is being fired up and down your body. What we know then is the brain isn't a concrete block. What I mean by that is I used to say, why was I born with a bad brain? Why was I born with an anxious brain? Why couldn't I have been born with a happy brain? Why couldn't I have been born with a confident brain? Because I believed that the brain I was born with was the brain that I died with. And I had to live within the limits of the brain I was born with, which we know now is not 100% not true. We know from a thing called neuroplasticity that the brain has an ability to regenerate and recreate itself all the time. Both its structure, its shape, and its chemistry is changing all the time. Wow. So if you want a better brain, we can literally build one. And when we dedicate our thought, when we become aware of certain things, we can literally see that part of the brain light up. It's getting electricity, it's producing neurotransmitters, and that part of the brain is getting bigger and stronger. And on the other side, we know through a thing called synaptic pruning, we know that when we don't use part of our brain, the brain says, I don't need this. So it starts to delete it. So it's like pruning a tree. Synaptic pruning is where we start to get rid of parts of the brain. So your brain is literally responding to your thoughts, to the things you say, the words you use, which was the first big awakening to me. If this isn't the brain I want, you mean by training, I can reshape it? And the answer is yes. So what we have to understand about the brain is not only is the brain not a concrete block, but it's not really even a solid thing. It's tiny billions of little wires. Each wire is called a neuron. And in order to stand up, so I have to push my weight down, I have to stand up, I need depth perception, spatial awareness, I need lots of different things. Even to stand up needs lots of these little wires to light up. So what happens is you have an intent, and the intent is to stand up. That intent gets fired into the brain and it ignites the neurological pathway. So one neuron gets an electrical current, and then that passes from one neuron to another, to another, to another, and now you have a pathway. So each time we do something, each time we say something, each time we listen to something, an electrical circuit gets fired through that neuron, and then that neuron gets fired and then it gets wired in a substance called myelin. Now think of myelin as insulation that goes over a pipe. It makes it bigger and stronger. So every time I say something, every time I do something, every time I think about something, every time I listen to something, it fires that neurological pathway. That pathway gets wrapped in myelin and it becomes the bigger, stronger pathway in the brain. So therefore, in a crisis pressure situation, when I need to find an answer fast, when I need a decision fast, the brain pathway that I'm going to go to is the one that's used most. And I always tend to say what I always said and do what I've always done. So what then if I was to change my language? What if I was to begin to use different words? Would that fire different pathways? Would it build neurons in the brain? Would it begin to restructure my brain? And the answer is yes. So instead of saying, God, I have a massive meeting tomorrow, I have a big match tonight. What if I lose the match? What if I play bad? When I say those words, your brain is intelligent. It knows now that you're thinking about something that's threatening. The brain can't distinguish between what you think about and what's actually happening. So the very fact that you're thinking about it means the brain thinks it's happening. So the brain says, oh shit, there's a threat happening here. There's danger. So it fires a neuron. It fires a way of thinking that creates a brain chemistry. And now that chemistry, that new electricity gets fired into the nervous system. And if what I'm thinking about is threatening or frightening or fear-based, it ignites the sympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is your fight or flight response. And the moment I ignite the sympathetic nervous system, my heart rate goes up, my breathing goes up, I start to get flooded in chemicals of adrenaline and noradrenaline and other stress hormones. And when I'm in the fight or flight mode, rest, healing, and digestion switches off. Now, the sympathetic nervous system is not a bad thing. There's a reason why we have it. So life is meant to be where we're exposed to threat or exposed to something new. We have to engage, we have to learn, we have to adapt, and then we recover. So think of when we go to a gym. The reason we get fitter, the way we build muscle, is that we expose ourselves to some type of stress. We stress the muscle, and then we recover. And while we're recovering, the micro tears that have happened in the muscle because we're lifting weights gets rebuilt. The sympathetic nervous system is for moments when we're in danger, when we have a life threat right in front of us. It heightens our focus, heightens our energy, heightens our ability to move, to think. And in short term, that is absolutely fine. But on the other side, we have the parasympathetic nervous system. And the parasympathetic nervous system, and only in the parasympathetic nervous system does the body begin to heal, repair cells, build new cells, detoxify the body. Only in the parasympathetic nervous system is the body come back into healing, rest, digestion. So the way we're meant to live is not, people say life isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. That's not actually correct. Life should be a sprint, recover, sprint, recover, sprint, recover. That's how we build resilience. That's how we build mindset. That's how we build. So we get exposed to something that's frightening or threatening. We experience it, we recover, we experience it again. And each time we experience it, it becomes less threatening, less threatening, less threatening. Think of the first time you tried to drive a car, or the first time you stood in front of a crowded hall to give a speech. It was probably terrifying. And now you do these things without thinking about it. So what we need in our life is where our thoughts and our emotions are switching on the sympathetic nervous system for short bursts, and then switching off the sympathetic nervous system and switching on the parasympathetic nervous system. And it's the ability to balance your central nervous system. It is the ability to balance the chemistry within the body. That is one of the biggest determinants to health and performance. When we're in the fight or flight mode, when we're in a stress mode, the prefrontal cortex of the brain shuts down. The prefrontal cortex is where our most accurate thinking, decision-making, that's where we need to be. So we have to begin to understand that health and performance is about balance. We need to know then that eventually the hormones and the chemicals of stress get passed into the gut. The gut and the brain are intimately linked by a thing called the gut-brain barrier. And for years, we thought that it was a one-way communication. We thought that the brain made the decisions and passed it to the gut. But now we know that the gut has neurons of its own, and the gut is thinking of its own, and that is why we now know the gut as a second brain. We know that the food we eat has a direct and immediate impact on how we feel mentally, our mental fitness, our decision-making, our mental energy. We know now that so much of anxiety and so much of depression and even Alzheimer's are linked to gut imbalances. Alzheimer's is now being described type 3 diabetes. We cannot think of the health of the brain, decision-making, mental clarity, mental focus, without also now thinking of the brain, of the gut. So now I began to discover things like food. And growing up, nobody taught me about food. I was raised on a diet of whatever was going. Loads of sweets where I could get them. Loads of white bread. Loads of tea. Very little fish. Very little fresh fruit and veg. So now I began to understand the gut. I dug out more and more books about the gut. And I came across this word called microbiome. I said, what is this? And I began to realize that about 70 to 80% of your immune system is in your gut. I began to realize that we're not just born with a good immune system or a bad immune system. That our immune system is actually responding to our thoughts and emotions. Our immune system is being managed by upgraded by, or depleted by our thoughts and emotions, which is an amazing concept. That the way we think, the way we breathe, and the food we eat, the exercise we take, the stress we deal with, can either upgrade our immune system or deplete our immune system. So now I began to understand I need to begin to work on my brain. I need to begin to work on my central nervous system. I began to understand that all of these physical symptoms I was experiencing were actually based on my mind. And when I started to ask people, can your thoughts affect your biology and your chemistry? Some people thought I was nuts. I was asking, can your thoughts, can the stories you tell yourself and the things you listen to, can they affect the functioning of your brain, the functioning of your central nervous system, the functioning of your gut and immune system? But there's a very simple answer to this. Think about when you get embarrassed. So I see Rachel Quinlan on. I hope you don't mind me picking you out. You're one of the people I can see. Let's say Rachel was on a great night out there recently, and she had great crack. And she really let the hair down and had great fun. And I videoed it. And now I said, now Rachel, now I'm going to show everyone the great crack you had the other night. And Rachel starts to remember. So she's firing a neurological pathway in the brain. The brain is firing the thoughts. The brain can't know whether it's happening now or not. Now she starts to think about what are people going to think. So she starts to get embarrassed. So a neurological thought became an emotion. And then what happens to Rachel's face when she gets embarrassed? Her cheeks become red. That's the physical reaction to an emotion. Think about when we get sad. We have a thought that triggers an emotion, and the emotion makes us cry. But crying is a physical reaction to an emotion. We're gone beyond the science where we doubt now that our thoughts and emotions affect our physical biology and our functioning. Now, I had all of this learned and studied by about 14 or 15. So now I was going back to my GP saying, can you tell me about my microbiome? Tell me 3 things I need to do every day to balance my microbiome. GPs are still struggling to tell us. I was asking my GP, how do I calm an overactive central nervous system? And what if the problem wasn't chemical? If the starting point to all my problems was emotional, then do you really think a chemical tablet is going to heal it? And I remember again to the day when my GP said to my mother, this guy's out to something and I can't answer it. But whatever you do, try your best. And I'll try to dig out some books. And in fairness to him, we started to dig out some books together. So when I work with human beings, what I'm understanding is what's happening within the brain of this person. What's happening within the chemistry? What's happening within the biology? When they stand on that green to win the putt for the Masters, what part of the brain is functioning? So now we have that beautiful word, bio-neurochemistry. We're just a beautiful mix. It's like we're like engines of a car. In order to function, an engine of a car needs an electrical spark that ignites with the petrol and sucks in air. And if the mix is right, bang, you have a beautiful combustion engine that works beautifully. If the mix gets wrong, either there's too much petrol or there's too much air or there's not enough spark, it doesn't function. So we are a beautiful mix. So now we begin to look at things like visualization. So if I was to begin to change the structure and the function of my brain, I needed to fire new neurological pathways. I need to build new pathways. So when waking up in the morning, instead of thinking of the 10 things that were going to go wrong, I would make myself start to think about 3 things that I really wanted to go well. No matter how simple that would be, I'd start to visualize something going well. And now you're firing a new pathway that's not threatening, that's not anxious, and now that's firing your parasympathetic nervous system and no stress. So I began to realize that as long as I'm visualizing, there's no anxiety. I'm feeling calm, I'm feeling relaxed, my body feels different, the tension's gone out of my body. So I started this beautiful process called visualization. Now, visualization also primes the unconscious mind. So if I was to sit here and do a presentation all about red cars and to tell you that the sale of red cars has gone through the roof and red is the most popular color, and we talked about red cars and I showed you 10 beautiful pictures of 10 beautiful cars. On your way home tonight, what is the color of car you'll see most of? Red. And you might say, geez, Gerry's onto something. I should have invested in red cars. They're after popping out of nowhere. They're not after popping out of nowhere. You're after becoming consciously aware of it. We know that the human brain can't take in every possible thought, every color, every light, every sound. So part of what we think is the reticular activating system, as well as regulating sleep, one of the things it regulates is what we give our attention to. And if we are to be bombarded with every possible thing that's in the world, the brain will be overloaded. So your reticular activating system, we're nearly certain now, is deleting 50 to 60% of what's in the universe. And it's only giving you access to see what you want to see. So long before Google, long before there was any social media analytics, the brain has its own way of understanding what you want. And whatever you want, it will give you more of, and whatever it thinks you don't want, it will delete. And you will never become consciously aware of those. So we're literally priming ourselves all the time. And once we form that inner unconscious belief, that inner picture, then the conscious mind is going to go in, it's going to go into the world and find only the things that match that picture. We see the world not as we are. We see the world not as it is. We see the world as we are. And proof of this is if I ask people, what color is the sky? Most people put their hand up quick if you're to win a prize. And you say blue. And then I say, really? And then somewhere in your head, you're going to say blue, blue. No, I don't think it's blue. No, it's not blue. Why is it not blue? Because there really is no sky. Sky is just empty space. Sky is colorless gas. So therefore there is no color. And that's the correct answer. There is no sky, there is no blue. We see blue because of light being refracted through moisture. The blue is in your eye, the blue is not in the world. We think the sound in the world is not. There's only vibration moving through energy. And it is your ear that picks up the frequency. It is your ear that transforms vibration into energy, into sound. And depending on your ear, human ear has a limited range of sounds. So sometimes you're sitting in your room, it's perfectly quiet, and your dog is going nuts. And you were saying, what the hell is wrong with that dog? And your dog is looking at you saying, what the hell is wrong with that human? Why can they not hear the noise? We can only see about 60 to 70% of the light in the world. We can only see a limited amount of hear a limited amount of frequency. We see the world not as it is, but as we are. Now, when you think of the way most people prime their unconscious mind, we wake up in the morning, we start to think of the heavy traffic, we start to listen to the radio, we're being bombarded with bad news. And your brain is saying, well, if this is what you're listening to, if this is what you're talking about, this must be what you're interested in. So I'm going to give you more of this. So now I began to realize the power of the stories we say, the power of the words we used. I realized how much of my time I was thinking about and speaking about the things I didn't want. And how little of my time I was thinking about and speaking about the things I did want. I spent so much of my time thinking about and speaking about the things I couldn't control, instead of speaking and thinking about the things I could control in this moment. So now my language began to change. I began to speak to myself differently. I became aware that the voice inside my head was my inner critic, always giving out to myself, always pushing myself hard, always worrying what other people thought. And I asked myself a very simple question one day. Would you speak to a child like you speak to yourself? Would you say the things to a loved one that you wouldn't say to yourself? And the answer was no. So the question then is, well, why? What do you believe about yourself? Why are you so hard on yourself? And until we change somebody's deepest beliefs, we change nothing. Some kid turns up at the Olympic Games with all the analysis and all the data and all the blood typing and all the biomarkers, all says you can be Olympic champion. If that kid doesn't believe they can be Olympic champion, they're not going to be Olympic champion. A building cannot stand outside the size of its foundations. If you build a building that's bigger than its foundations, the building will fall. And likewise, your beliefs. Your life can't be bigger or better than the size of your beliefs. So I began to ask myself, what is my deepest belief? And my deepest belief was that I was a failure in the eyes of my dad. I believed I wasn't loved. I had this vision of the son that I thought he could love, and everything that I thought I should be, I wasn't. And I kept giving out to myself for not being what I thought I should be, instead of accepting myself with love and compassion for who I was. And it really began to see, what if I change my beliefs? Who am I trying to impress? Who am I trying to be? And what if I just give myself permission to be myself exactly as I am? And what if I was courage to tell people I struggle with anxiety? I need help. What would that feel like? Nothing impacts your performance, nothing impacts your health and well-being more than the relationship you have with yourself. Because you can listen to Gerry for 1 hour a week, you can go to your strength and conditioning coach 2 hours a week, but you're listening to yourself every single minute of every day. And your unconscious mind is listening to everything you say, and it believes it. So I began to find a beautiful lady called Louise Hay. Before my wife, this was the lady who changed my life. Positive affirmations. And when you're growing up in Glenamaddy in the 1980s, and if anyone knows Glenamaddy, it's not a buzzing metropolis. And I'm looking for a lady called Louise Hay to do positive affirmations. Everyone thought I was nuts. But I found, and I bought the tape, and that time, you're probably all too young, but that time I had a tape recorder, and I put a tape, I don't know if people even remember the old tape with the 2 wheels that you spin. I'd put that in and I'd start playing. And to this day, Louise Hay, 101 Power Thoughts, is how I start and end every day of my life. Louise Hay started training me to say things to myself like, I am a kind, beautiful human being. I deserve all the love. I release myself from all that I'm not. And I accept with grace and love all that I am. I stop comparing myself to others. And the more I started to embrace this affirmation, the more I started to change my inner talk, was the more the neurons in my brain that were being fired were different. They were no longer threatening, no longer giving out. Now that began to send a different message into my central nervous system. I was beginning to fire the parasympathetic nervous system. I began to discover that through the power of breath, 5 breaths alone, scientifically proven to take us out of the sympathetic nervous system and into the parasympathetic nervous system. I began to learn to breathe correctly. I want everyone, just for a second, to put your right hand on your belly. And I'm going to ask you to take a big, deep breath. As deep as you can, breathe in, hold it for 3 seconds, and then breathe out. 1, 2, 3, breathe in. Now breathe out. Now there's a little fitness test. When you breathed in, did your belly go in or out? Most people, when you breathe in, their belly goes in. Has anyone ever watched a little baby breathing? When a baby breathes in, their belly goes out. So they inhale and their belly expands. They exhale and their belly goes in. The opposite to what we do as humans. There's 2 ways we can breathe. One is optimal breathing, where we're using the 4 to 5 liters of our lung capacity, where we're taking about 6 to 8 breaths a minute. Or the other is simply threat-based breathing, where we're breathing up to 20 breaths a minute, and we're not using 5 liters of our lungs, we're using a half liter. Your breath alone has an amazing ability to trigger chemical reactions in your brain. Your breathing alone fires a powerful message to your brain whether I'm under threat or not. And if I'm breathing shallow and fast, your brain just thinks you're doing that because there's a threat out there, so it puts you in high alert. I began to develop things like meditation. And first I just did them because it made me feel good. It seemed to slow my mind down. I didn't know the science. 30 years later, we know now that meditation actually changes the waves in your brain. We know that our brain has lots of different brain waves. When we're in beta brainwave, that's stress. Now, if we can move out of that and move towards theta brainwave, that operates a whole different part of the brain. And the more we get out of beta is the better chance we have of entering what's called brain coherence, where all parts of the brain are working together in the state of coherence. And then that connects with the central nervous system, that connects with the heart. And now we have this whole body coherence, where everything is slowed down and everything is expanded and everything is slowed down. One of the Formula One drivers I work with hit the newspapers when he said, I've come to realize that I'm driving really, really well and the car is moving really fast when everything seems to be slow, when I'm not thinking about it. When we begin to look at coherence and brain coherence, there is nothing more powerful than meditation to help do this. We know now that meditation is one of the things that also changes the firing of the brain. The part of your brain that's related to stress, the amygdala, actually begins to shrink as we meditate. And the part of the brain to do with concentration begins to get built. Meditation helps us build the concentration muscle. So I started to understand the power that meditation has. So now I was discovering self-talk, breathing routines, getting rid of processed food because I know the immediate and damage impact that has to my mindset, but also my immune system. So self-talk, meditation, visualization, no processed food. And suddenly I was going back to my GP saying, I feel totally different. I can't remember when I was anxious last. I feel calm, I feel confident. And you know what? My stammer has disappeared. So much of the sickness that we experience in today's world is chronic illness. That is the greatest pandemic in the world right now. And the biggest driver of chronic illness is stress, processed food, lack of exercise. When we talk about the disease of distraction, the brain can't really, the system can't really determine between fear, stress, anxiety. It just is all a load on the system. And if we live in a sympathetic dominant state, we know that the hormones of stress, the chemicals of stress begin to deplete and wear down our body and our immune system. And we can literally eat, think ourselves into a state of sickness. We know that sickness and health is not the same sides of a coin. We know that between optimal health and sick, there's at least 7 different phases. And we're always moving up and down. But in Ireland, unfortunately, we wait until we get sick, until we do something about it. But what if we had a more proactive approach to health and performance, where people were turning up in your organization, energized and focused, and not living from the hormones of stress? And instead of adrenaline and cortisol, what if now we had oxytocin? So what is oxytocin? Well, oxytocin is a hormone that you're flooding as you come out the birth canal. It accelerates brain development. It builds social connection and attachment. It gives you a fearlessness. And we can still produce oxytocin by feeling loved, by feeling grateful, by feeling connected, by feeling valued. We flood the human system in oxytocin. And when I worked with incredible teams in a dressing room 5 or 10 minutes before the big game, the biggest thing in that dressing room was love and understanding. We were cared for each other deeply. And that flooded their systems in oxytocin, which is the ultimate performance drug. But how many people are walking around the workspace and they're operating from a place of stress, anxiety, and fear? And there is no performance. There is only underperformance. Distraction is the enemy of excellence. Busy is the enemy of performance. The greatest teams now that I get to work with, corporate organizations, they meditate together regularly. They get talks from nutritionists on the microbiome. They practice yoga together. Because the two things we all want is we all want to be successful. I've been lucky enough to work with winners. I want to win everything. I want to be super successful, but not at the cost of our health. If I thought for a second that the work we were doing or the way we push athletes was going to lead to them getting sick, I would walk away from it in a moment. But how many companies, how many organizations have a culture of stress that will eventually make people sick? Because now we know the disease of distraction. We know now more than ever that if we live in a state of disease, now listen to the word disease. Disease means lack of ease. If we live in a sympathetic dominant state with a lack of ease in the mind and a lack of ease in the spirit, that will eventually become a physical disease. If you want high performing, repeatable, sustainable performance, first thing you need is healthy people. You need to remove the hormones of stress. And you need to build practices into every single day that are allowing people now to operate from a place of brain coherence. Systems are never more important than people. And your person is a beautiful mix of electricity, chemistry, and biology. We need to understand and work with all three. And finally, by the age of 18 or 19, pestering my GP week in, week out, going to him with these books, I asked him the next most important question. I said, if the brain, this just dawned on me at the end, if the brain is responding to your thought, then where's the thought coming from? He said, what? Well, I said, listen to this. Your brain fires a signal, but does the brain generate the signal? And now we know it doesn't. The two big hard questions in science is, how did the world begin? And the second is, where is consciousness? My belief, and what neuroscience is backing up, is that your brain is like a beautiful TV set. It has an incredible ability to receive a signal, process the signal, and transmit the signal. But here's a question. When you're watching a sad movie on your TV, is the TV sad? Does the TV even know you're watching a movie? Does your TV know you're even in the room? Does your TV know it's a TV? Does your TV ever ask itself, I wonder, am I a good TV? I wonder, do people like me? Is there anything else I could be doing with my life? And the answer is no, because your TV is an electrical, it's a processing system, but it does not have consciousness. And consciousness does not exist in the brain. It does not exist in the body. It does not exist in the liver, the kidney, or the lung. We are walking, breathing electrical energy fields. And we know that the electricity, the spark that enters the brain probably doesn't have its origin in the brain and probably not in the body. And 20 years ago, I began to discover quantum physics and the role of quantum physics and the electrical energy flow of the body and how we as energy and all atoms, everything is energy. What if we begin to understand the energy part of the human being? That electromagnetic field that I talked about that keeps everything in the universe floating, if that turned off in the morning, the first thing that would happen is your body would fall to pieces. The only thing holding your body together is electromagnetic field. And what we know now is much of the chemistry and the biology in your body is actually responding to the energy, not the other way around. So when we talk about neurobiological chemistry, now we can put the word quantum in front of that. Quantum, bio, neuro, chemistry. That is what human beings are. And when you can ignite someone's passion, someone's spark, someone's soul, now you're onto something special. And when the soul is alive, and when the soul is happy, when the soul is engaged, then the body engages. And it regulates the system. Psychology is the study of, and psyche is soul. Psychologists do not study the human brain. That's neuroscience. Psychologists study the human soul. And your soul is your inner spark of light. It is what makes you you. It is what makes you different. It is your passion, your dreams, your identity. It is the spark of electricity that brings your matter alive. And most industries in the world have embraced the reality of quantum and energy. Medicine is slowly following. I don't have all the answers. I'm still on a journey. But I'm learning all the time. And I'm learning that the power we have is within. We can't control what happens to us outside of us, but we always get to control what happens inside of us. Part of us is responding to the outside world, but the biggest part of us is responding to our inner world, to our thoughts, to the stories we tell ourselves, to the things we think about, and to the things we live. In order to change your state of being, you have to shift your personality, which means shifting your chemistry, shifting your biology, changing your nutrition, sparking your microbiome, and shifting your energy. There is nothing static about the human being. And every single one of us is capable of change, is capable of growth, capable of development. And when you begin to realize the power that you have to regulate yourself, to detach from the outside world, the power that you have to change the functioning of your own brain and immune system, the power you have to balance your own central nervous system, we begin then to no longer outsource our happiness or performance. We begin to realize that we are the biggest contributors to our own lives. I hope that helps. I hope we've time for questioning, and I'm happy to take any.
What a positive message to end your presentation on. And thank you so much for giving such a calm and measured introduction to complex ideas, bio-neurochemistry, but also to, being so open about your own personal journey. We got a lot of questions in, and unfortunately, we're going to have a few minutes. But I think bringing it back, I suppose, to the context that most of us are working in a large in a large organization, perhaps as line managers. Some of the questions have come in that context. So can I throw maybe 3 at you? Firstly, in a remote world, how do we pick up on some of these bio-neuro indicators that somebody is under stress, that somebody is disconnecting? As a line manager, how can we encourage people to check in on themselves? And also, any motivational things, like what would be the first message you would give to someone that you sense, something is out of sync here?
Yeah, I think everything is culture. So think in your own home. When I go into my parents' house, I don't spit on the floor. I don't put my shoes on the table. I don't start using bad language. And yet there's no words on my parents' wall that says I can't do those things. It's a culture. So the first culture is, do you have a culture of building human performance? Do you have a culture of wellness? When you go on your meetings, are they all mainly about the business, the systems, the process? Or how many times do you turn up and just ask people, how are we doing? Do you lead from vulnerability? Do you look at workload?
Yes.
Times that emails are being sent?
Mm.
Listen to the words people are using. Are they using words like crazy, manic, very busy? Can't get through my day without 3 coffees. And there comes a time you have to say, stop. Let's stop. This isn't sustainable. And education and awareness is the biggest thing. So people will only buy into something when they connect with a personal why. So you have to ask people, if you continue to live the way you live, work the way you work, eat the way you eat, what does that look like in your future? And when you connect to somebody's why, and your why might be, I want to see my children grow up. I want to be at my child's wedding. So the earlier guest talk around connecting with human beings. Why do you work here? How does working here make you feel? How could I make you feel happy and connected more? How do I make you feel stressed less? And right now, what are the daily activities? What are the daily habits that we're permitting that aren't conducive to health and performance? Mm-hmm. Can we make a collective effort? So that's what I'm saying about teams. Teams I work with now, they don't start big meetings without 10 minutes of meditation. Some of the teams I work with have me and a nutritionist doing some coaching with people. So it's really around committing to people's health and performance. And then when people feel that you trust them and you value them, not just as a commodity, but you're actually investing in their health. Now they feel committed, they feel connected, they feel valued, and now you've awakened something else.
Thanks, Gerry. Other questions came into the chat that we simply don't have time to look at. But if you have a few moments, we'd really appreciate if you had a look in the chat to see.
I've loads of time.
There's some really nice things said about your talk as well. Somebody's there trying to book you for the Mayo footballers, but please don't commit to anything until you've seen the West Hurlers first, okay? Okay, the hat is going on, folks, because it's spot prize time now. We have 5 copies of Gerry's book, Awaken Your Power Within. I know you're inspired by his talk here, but can we roll the tombolo as quick as we can and get 5 names out of the hat? Okay. Nevin, here we go. Okay, first copy of Awaken the Power Within is going all the way to Limerick. Well done, Bobby O'Connor, down the M18 all the way to UL. Second copy of Gerry's book is coming to edge of your seat stuff, folks. Oh, another one down in Limerick. Okay, we'll save on postage. And to me, UL, you're getting one too. Okay, third copy. Will they go east? Will they go north?
West. I'm going to predict it.
Or will they stay west? Emma Walsh, Trinity, on its way.
Oh, fantastic.
Fourth copy. By the way, Gerry, thank you for being so generous. I'm sure people will be eager to read what you have to say, because obviously,
no problem.
I think you touched on so many interesting topics. Another copy going to Trinity, Colette Kelleher. And finally, our 5th copy today is going, nothing ended up in Cork yet, folks.
How about Galway?
So this one? Ah, did Anna McKenna, UCC. Great stuff. Gerry, we're going to say goodbye, but if you could turn your attention to some of the questions, the comments, we'd really, really appreciate it. Okay, have we got Jane Furness on Zoom? Jane Furness is in Cornmarket Financial Services. She is a client services accountant.